This is Edward Capozzi, the Domino Lawyer, and we are here for the first episode of the Domino Lawyer Podcast. I am the Domino Lawyer. I wrote this book called The Domino Theory, and this is the way I try cases. So I am so honored to welcome our first ever guest, the legendary Bruce Nagel, Esquire. Now, let me tell you, before I introduce Bruce, I went to law school down in South Jersey at Camden, Rutgers Camden School of Law. And my first job out of law school was in Philadelphia, and I lived in South Philly. And I moved up to New Jersey in around 2006 or so, northern New Jersey, that is, up by the George Washington Bridge. And, you know, when you enter a new arena or a new area, you know, certain lawyers have reputations that precede them. They're legendary. And Bruce Nagel was at the top of the list. So I always wanted to meet this guy. And we've actually become friends over the years. And Bruce, thanks for coming on. I really appreciate it.
It's just great. It's great to be here, Ed. I am so incredibly flattered. I mean, just keep heaping the praise. I can't get enough of it. It's great.
Well, we're gonna be praising you quite a bit today.
So good.
So Bruce, let's start out with, where are you from?
So I'm a North Jersey guy. Grew up in Clifton, New Jersey. Went to Clifton High School. Did my college in upstate New York at Cornell, and then went back to Manhattan, Lower Manhattan at NYU Law School. But I'm really a born and bred Jersey guy. And when I got out of law school, I came back to Jersey. My first job was in a major firm in Newark, and I've been here ever since.
How long has that been?
I was admitted to the bar in '77, so I don't want to put rings on my head, but you know, we're going on 50 years now. It's a long time.
Wow, yeah, that's true. So why did you become a lawyer?
Well, initially, I really wanted to emulate my grandfather, who was a very, very well-known, very soft-spoken, diminutive guy. He just commanded respect wherever he went. Everybody knew him, and he just really was the glue in my family. I just adored him, and that's really why I did it. And then on top of that, ever since I was in grade school, I was really just a loudmouth bad kid. I was a very, very disruptive kid, always getting thrown out of school, from grade school through law school, getting thrown out all the time. And this kind of was a good way of institutionalizing the fight that was in me. I was always picking fights. I was always getting in fights. So this was kind of a good way to deal with that.
Yeah, one of the things, you know, we talk a lot, we go to lunch a lot, and we talk, and we're both kind of from similar backgrounds. I'm from Long Island, I'm Italian. You're from North Jersey, you're Jewish, right? But, you know, they always say the Italians and the Jews are very similar. And, but we're blue collar guys.
That's right.
You know, my father worked for Loco for 45 years, and I had every job. I was a paper boy, a pizza delivery guy. I worked in a nursery. I worked in construction. I was a tile setter. I was a sanitation worker, a garbage man. I mean, I've had every dirty job you can have. And I think
as have I. Started working when I was 11 years old for 10 cents a half an hour, picking up tennis balls on the courts when the rich guys were getting tennis lessons. That's how I made money.
Yeah. So now you're a partner, obviously, at Nagel Rice, right?
Yeah.
Now, for those who don't know the situation here, so we're all from the same, basically, complex. I'm at 101 Eisenhower Parkway. Bruce is at 103 Eisenhower Parkway. And then there's another building, 105 Eisenhower Parkway. So if I want to go see you, all I got to do is walk across the parking lot.
Come on over.
And how long have you been with Mr. Rice?
So Jay and I go back to grade school. And really, we started talking about becoming lawyers probably around junior high school. And we founded this firm in '83. So we're one of the few firms that still exist in Jersey. You know, over 40 years old. I'm kind of proud of it.
We've been here 55 years.
It's amazing. Just amazing.
Bruce, how did we meet?
Well, I got to tell you, similar to what you said, when you go into a certain area, you got your eyes open all the time. And trial lawyers, by definition, really are busybodies and we're gossips. We want to know who's doing what. And what I always did early on is I identified those handful of lawyers that were winning cases, that were tough as nails, that were smart and set themselves apart. And Ed, it's got to be probably around 2010, maybe 2012. I think he came to Jersey is like 2007 or 8.
Yeah.
All right. So you're here in North Jersey, really that for a long period of time when I keep hearing the verdicts you're getting, and you're trying soft tissue cases, you're trying back and neck injuries, stuff that most lawyers don't have the skill set and are settling them for $7,500. You're getting you're getting these giant verdicts, all right? So I heard about you, and what you don't know is I started showing up at your trials. I started sitting in the back and watching how you did things. And I said, this guy has got it, plain and simple. And to this day, when people say to me, "I want you to tell me about the great trial lawyers in Jersey," literally, I can count on one hand who they are, and you're always number one.
Oh, thanks, man. That's great. Now, Bruce, you are probably the best lawyer, not only in New Jersey, but maybe in the United States. So
Please, please,
I really
don't go that
appreciate
far.
that coming from you. Give me some of the greatest moments you've had as a lawyer. Like, does any single moment or series of moments stick out to you?
Yeah, it's a great question. So, I think some of the defining moments really in terms of the timeline. I'm a 2-year lawyer in a big firm in Newark, and they throw me on a case involving the construction of the Alaskan pipeline. And I don't know, I don't know anything about constructing a pipeline. I didn't go to engineering school. I'm terrible in terms of spatial issues, but it was a client who was an absolute electrical engineering genius. He wasn't paying his bills, and in a large firm, the last thing they want to do is invest assets in clients that don't pay their bills. So at 2 years out, they say, go and try the case, which I did. And I was against three of the best lawyers in the country. And remarkably, after 2 weeks in federal court, I got a verdict for 100 cents to the dollar. Back then, it was a lot of money, $204,000. But in those days, it was a breakthrough for me. And I said, wow, if I could try a case, and I've never done a jury trial, if I could relate to 8 people I never met before and have them award me 100 cents on my damage verdict, the damage amount, I said, you know what? Maybe I can do it. So shortly after that, I opened up my own shop. And then if I have to look at certain kind of guideposts along the way, uh, in the landscape of things, I look at the eating disorder litigation that I did between 2008 and 2011, where all of the carriers were not paying for medical treatment for primarily women with bulimia and anorexia. And I'm the lawyer that came up with the idea to litigate that issue. And I cracked the three lead carriers and provided coverage for 4 million New Jersey citizens and distributed tens of millions of dollars of denied coverage. And what was so important about that is I would get calls literally every day for those years from families, distraught families saying, my daughter is dying. Please help us. So, to the extent that I believe that I did something that really helped save lives, that was extremely important for me as well. I also look at what I've done kind of at the appellate level in the Supreme Court of New Jersey, where I've had 18 cases, and I've appeared for NJJ, which is the lead trial association, which you were the president.
Yes, I was.
And I'll parenthetically make a note that I never go to NJ affairs. I was on the board for years, but politically, I have real trouble with them in terms of how they run the organization. But I came to your swearing in, and I came to your departure dinner, remember?
Yes, I do.
And I showed up.
I appreciate
I
that.
said, Ed, I don't go to this crap, but for you, I'm coming.
Thanks, man.
I think it was at Hamilton Farms years ago.
Yeah, it
Yeah,
was.
yeah.
Yeah.
So I've done a lot of work at the appellate level, which I think has also changed the way trial practice works, and has helped people. And then recently, I was very proud of what I did in the Paramus bus case. That was a tragedy that occurred a number of years ago, and I unfortunately represented the family of the young woman that died, um, as well as another child that was severely injured. And that case, we settled that for somewhere north of 20 million. And I will tell you that what was significant about that case is not just the settlement, but that triggered the use of harnesses in buses for children. That was a long time coming, and that case really highlighted the danger of having unbelted children on buses.
Or lap belts.
Or lap belts. So that was another highlight really of my.
Well, I think I told you the story at lunch today. So I had been approached by the family of the woman, the young girl who was killed, and he came to my office. He wanted to discharge or fire the lawyer that he had at the time, and that lawyer, his son-in-law, worked with me here. So I had a little bit of a conflict. So I met this gentleman, and he was obviously, and rightfully so, an angry man, and he wanted blood. And he said to me, "I want an aggressive lawyer. I hear you are the most aggressive lawyer in New Jersey." And I said, "Well, there might be one guy that's more aggressive than me, and it's Bruce Nagel." And he ultimately went and hired you, which, that I would have done the same, to be quite honest with you. If anybody in my family was ever injured, you're the guy that I'm coming to. So, and naturally, you did a great job for him.
Well, I thank you now. I thank you then when I heard about it. I thank you now. And that case was a significant case, and again, changed the way that we live and protected our children. Obviously, there's no better priority than protecting this.
Now, you don't only, because I'm a PI lawyer. I don't, for those of you who don't know this, so I started my career in Philadelphia. I worked for a personal injury law firm there, but they did primarily medical malpractice, plaintiff's work. So I worked there. I was an associate at the time. So my boss was Mark Levy, who was an awesome, very good attorney. So I worked for him, and he taught me how to be a lawyer. But when I moved to my firm where I am now, we have a big healthcare practice here. So part of the deal with me coming here was I couldn't sue doctors and hospitals anymore because a lot of them were our clients. We have too many conflicts. It just wasn't a good look for the firm. So I stopped doing medical malpractice, but I know you do a lot of medical malpractice, and not only medical malpractice and catastrophic type injury cases, you do other stuff too, right?
I'm one of the throwbacks. I'm kind of a dinosaur because I call myself a trial lawyer with a lot of subsets. So I represent a lot of law firms when they break up. I represent some of the largest families, most influential families in the country in all kinds of disputes. I have a huge medical malpractice group, which of course you know about. You probably have done across the board. Our cases have been noted by the Law Journal, I think 4 or 5 years as the number one settlement or verdict of the year repeatedly. So we do a lot of different areas, all under the umbrella of litigation.
And how do you do that? I mean, I also tried a lot of different types of cases because when I first became a lawyer, I wanted to take anything I could take. Obviously I wanted to make some money, so I had to try a lot of different types of cases. I was trying chancery division cases. I was trying DUI defense. I was trying like armed robbery cases representing defendants. I was trying, fall downs, auto cases, med mal cases. I would try anything. If you came at me with it, I'd try it. And, and a lot of people say, how did you do that? I mean, how I did it was, I was just basically, using my common sense going into these cases. A lot of times when there's experts, I let the expert kind of do his job, and you're proving the case. It's a battle of the experts in a lot of cases. And that's kind of how I did it. How do you do it?
Identical. The joke was that when I started my own practice, I hooked up with Jay Rice, my partner. And anything I didn't know, which was a lot, I'd say to the client, look, I'm not an expert in this area, but my partner Jay is. And of course, I would walk the client into his office and he would always say, why are you doing this to me? But I was not letting the client leave the office. Same thing. There were weeks where we couldn't make payroll, and I only had one part-time secretary when we started out years ago. So whatever was there, we learned it, and thankfully we did it well.
Yeah. And I always say I was lucky because I won a lot of those cases, and even though I didn't even know the law, I would kind of learn it on the fly and figure it out. But I was a gunslinger. To me, a trial lawyer, being a lawyer to me was always being a trial lawyer. Like I never, ever considered doing anything but trial work.
Yeah, and I agree with you. And I think if I ask you directly, you'd probably get the same answer that I do. One is we probably both hate bullies, and that's one of the reasons why we went into this. And number two, as difficult as it is, day after day, week after week, where you're working 12, 14, 16 hours a day, no sleep, you're not talking to your wife and kids, you're not talking to anybody, you're alone, you're really a loner. there is something that is beyond exhilarating when you try cases and win cases. And it really is, it's a, it's a goal you cannot match in other areas.
I agree. I mean, whenever I'm going to get a verdict, like when I leave my car, I park my car in the parking lot and I get out of the car and I'm waiting, for a verdict. I'm like, when I get back to this car, I'm either going to be the happiest guy in the world or the most miserable guy in the world. Most of the time I end up happy, but getting a verdict is you can't even describe how euphoric it is. It's
That's right.
really something
That's
else.
right. And I think the toll, first of all, you can't be a completely integrated personality like us and do it. So we all have fractures in our souls. That's what I believe. Trial lawyers are fractured, all right? And we need this in order to kind of heal those fractures, wherever they come from, early childhood, early relationship, whatever it may be. We need that. And that is why if you look around, I can count right now no more than 10 lawyers in the entire state that I would consider competent to try a case. No more than 10. And there's 130,000 registered lawyers in New Jersey. And I think you probably agree with me.
I would say 5.
There's a need we have to do it. There's very few people that have that need and can do it in a courtroom.
And when I do it, I always say, like, I do some crazy things. I'd be fighting with the adjuster in the courtroom, and I'm like, you're getting fired after this case is over. And I could settle the case, for a very good amount of money, but I refuse to do it. And then I go home, it's 2:00 in the morning. I'm preparing these witnesses. I'm like, what am I doing this for? Like, why don't I just settle the case? I could walk away tomorrow, with $100,000 in my pocket and go to sleep. Because you don't sleep, you don't eat. It's rough, you got to really build up a stamina. When I first started trying cases, I would try 15 a year. I think I'd be on trial like 44 weeks of the year. And I had such stamina. I can go from one trial to the next because I didn't lose. So I think once you win, you get a little more cocky and a little more arrogant and you just keep going. So as long as I was winning, I had the energy to try another one the next week or every 2 weeks or so. So I was constantly on trial.
The real problem is I can't do anything else. And I don't think you can do anything else. Once you get hooked early on, it's in your blood. And the other stuff, the day-to-day work in the office, I actually find boring. I need to be in a courtroom. I need to be in a fight. And quite frankly, more than just being a fight in a courtroom, I've had fist fights in courtrooms. The last one was in front of a judge who then had his own personal problem and asked me to argue for the Supreme Court on his behalf, which I did. So, I mean, that's the nature of being a good trial lawyer. You got to be there and you got to be up for the fight in any form that it presents.
And what? And I know I've heard the same thing about you. So when I try a case, people that come and watch, like there were cases I tried that were pretty significant cases, and there were 100 lawyers watching. I mean, so it's like an event, So when they're in there and they're like cheering me on, some of them are cheering on, some of them want you to lose, because they're jealous. But they say that when I stand up to cross-examine somebody, or anytime I stand up, the jury gets up on the edge of their seats. And then when the defense lawyer gets on, they all they lean back and they're like basically falling asleep. And every judge who I've ever tried a case before says after the trial, that was the funnest trial I've ever had. You get that stuff too?
The answer is yeah. And I got to tell you, and I attribute a fair amount of that really to our upbringing. Again, we both grew up in blue-collar neighborhoods. We both worked since we're young kids. I worked as many jobs you did in all kinds of crazy stuff over the years. And the reality is we have the ability, thankfully, to stand before a jury and talk to a corporate executive, an unemployed janitor, and a stonemason. I mean, no matter what they are, we're going to talk to them. We're going to get through them because that's the way we grew up. That's who we dealt with in grade school and junior high school and high school. And that skill set is something that just doesn't exist around town.
Because I know some really good lawyers, and great lawyers, but they can't win a trial. I mean, there's something missing. I mean, you can't put your finger on it, but you just can't.
I agree with it. Yeah.
So I want to talk to you about this book. Okay. So this book is called The Last Mob Lawyer. So, I've written a book, as I showed you earlier, The Domino Theory, and Bruce wrote a book called The Last Mob Lawyer. So I want to talk about this book because you gave it to me. Thank you for that. And I read it, and it's really interesting. So why don't you tell everyone what this book is about and how it came to be?
Okay, I will. So there's a lawyer in town by the name of Chris Franzblau. He's currently 94 years old. When I got out of law school, as you and I both talked, we kind of identified who were the leaders, who were the icons, who were the people in the press all the time. On the criminal side, it was Chris Franzblau, and literally, when I was working in Newark, his office was a couple of doors down, and I would see him around. Never talked to him, never met him, but he was always the guy representing the mob. And years later, maybe 15 years later, I started having civil cases against him. He would be representing major businessmen in the area, some of the gangsters, and I would be against him civilly. And we never got along, to the point that there was incidents where we would get up out of our chair in the middle of a deposition and charge each other. We almost came to blows a couple of times. And he's a good 20, 25 years older than I was, and he was rough as you could be. I didn't talk to him for 20 years. Then at a wedding of a mutual friend, they said, "All right, come on, fellas, you're getting together. It's time to bury the hatchet." I looked at him, I said, "All right, how about the middle of your forehead?" He didn't like that. Extended my hand, shook hands, and then about a year later, I said, "Look, I followed who you've represented, and I don't want those stories to die with you." So about 10, 12 years ago, I did a oral history of who we represented and the background of the mob and the overlap with American politics post-war. And it was fascinating. I then transcribed about 10, 12 hours of video history into the same as a deposition, and then converted it to a book. So this book, I wrote the book as if I was him, recounting all of the people he interacted with and represented. So in the book, you're going to hear about him representing the head of the Genovese crime family, Sam the plumber, which is another very famous gangster here in New Jersey, the release of the secret FBI wiretaps in 1965 and why they were released. You'll hear about him representing Meyer Lansky, who was part of Meyer Lansky, Lucky Luciano, uh, uh, a lot of the early gangsters. You'll hear about him playing golf with guys like Longies Willman, who was part of the Luciano group and controlled the dog.
The interesting part of it is because when I read it, I'm trying to figure out what did Bruce write, what did Chris write, and I guess now you're explaining how it was
I wrote
written.
it as if I was him.
Gotcha.
Exactly.
It's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Now, everybody wants to know, because you say it, that you know where Jimmy Hoffa is buried. So how does that all weave into this? Which that's quite a coincidence, don't you think?
It's a 1 in a billion coincidence. All right. And when I tell the story, most people say, "You're making this up." All right. So here's the story. My roommate at Cornell was a Cornell engineer, very bright guy, to this day, my dearest friend. And he graduates in 75, and his family was a major contractor. They built mostly warehouses throughout New Jersey. And his family built most of the warehouses for Hart's Mountain in the Meadowlands. When they assembled that property,
Sure.
it was his family that did it. So his father died in 78, and at the Shiva, which is you pay respects in our tribe. At the Shiva, he says, "I got to tell you something." I said, "What is it? What is it?" He said, "I swore to my father I would never say a word, but I got to tell you." And he tells me the story that he is on a construction site under the Pulaski Skyway in Jersey City. 2 black Cadillacs with Michigan plates pull up. The trunk is opened. They take out of the trunk a body wrapped in a sheet, and they put it in along with a load of rotten eggs and mutton that came in, I believe, from Australia. And then they pour lye and dirt on it, and they do that for a while. Goes home and he tells his father. His father says, and his father was a World War II combat Marine. I think he was at Iwo Jima. I mean, he was, and I remember him as if it's today. He was a man of very few words. And when he looked at you, you got nervous. And he said, my father looked at me, he said, that was Jimmy Hoffa. You will never breathe a word of it. And then he told me at his father's shiva what he had seen. We were a couple 100 yards away, and my buddy called the reporter and said, by the way, I was there. You're close. He's a couple 100 yards. And on top of him, the reason why you're never going to find him is we built the building. His family was doing it. We built the building. That's why you're not going to find it. And then when the book came out, lo and behold, we got a call from another man who was there at part of the burial who said, you are the only people who got it right. I was there. I saw it. You're 1,000% correct. And I have that affidavit of the man that was there in my.
Wow, it's wild.
Yeah.
So, Bruce, the domino theory. After I read your book, you were reading my book. We were both reading them at the same time. Some of the things that, because we had lunch afterwards, and you came with a whole notebook full of things.
I just loved it.
So there were some of the things, because we were trying to compare how you try a case, how I try a case, or how I prepare and how you prepare. And one of the things that you brought up to me was, I was saying in the book that you got to depose every expert. Now, that's not how I'm practicing these days. I have kind of altered the way I practice, but the reason I was doing that at the time was because, the type of cases that I was handling was mostly ortho cases, soft tissue type stuff. So you had the same doctors again and again and again on these cases. And every time I would depose them, but I would depose them in a lot of different ways. If I had this specific defense doctor, sometimes on 5 cases or 8 cases or 10 cases, I would pick the weakest lawyer on all the 10 cases, and I would send a dep notice for him, but then I would depose him on another case. So the doctor didn't know what case I was deposing him on. He thought I was deposing him on this real easy case with a bulge, where he wrote a little 2-page report. Right. Meanwhile, I'm asking him questions regarding a completely different case. So that's really the reason I was doing it. Plus, I just wanted to hassle these guys, harass them a little bit. But then you said, I don't depose the experts at all. And I said, it's funny because I'm not doing that now. That's the way I'm doing it now. So why wouldn't you depose them?
So it's a great question, and it's really been a subject of some really interesting debate among the lawyers, the plaintiffs' bar. So I routinely depose them. I did it for years, probably for 20, 25 years. And I realized that 2 things would happen when I took a deposition. One is they would fire the expert and get somebody else. Now, on the plaintiff side, if we want to substitute an expert, the courts wouldn't allow it. On the defense side, they allowed it all the time. The second thing that would happen is I would give them a dress rehearsal as to what I was going to do on the stand when they took the stand. And they would be prepared for my lines of cross. All right.
Yep.
I didn't want to give them those 2 advantages. So I stopped many years ago. I stopped doing depositions, and many plaintiffs' lawyers, in quote, trial lawyers, which is a joke for me, they would stand up in the lectures, and you and I have both lectured to thousands of lawyers how to try cases. They'd stand up and say, I think Bruce Nagel is committing walking malpractice, presumptive malpractice, because he doesn't do depositions. And I'd sit there laughing. I say, oh yeah, get ready for my cross cold. All right. Yeah. So now I try a case, I get a pretty good verdict. It happens that the other lawyer and I are doing a lecture for ICL, for one of the continuing legal groups. 2 weeks later. So, and coincidentally, the topic is dealing with experts. So he stands up, he says, for 25 years, everybody said Bruce commits malpractice for not deposing experts. He said, let me tell you something right now. I saw what he did to my experts 2 weeks ago. It ain't malpractice. It's brilliant.
That's great.
So that's why I stopped doing it.
What I've been doing also is I don't want them to, I don't want to let the cat out of the bag. I don't want them to see what I'm going to do. I want to ambush them.
That's right.
And when I read their reports, right away things jump out at me like that's crazy.
That's
This
right.
is crazy.
That's right.
I'm not going to file a motion to bar him. I'm not going to expose him. I'm just going to ambush him when I get to trial because there's no way he's going to be able to get out of it.
And there's no way that the defense will prep him. They just won't know.
Exactly.
No way.
Because if you are effective, the two things are going to happen. You're going to settle the case. That's the one downside, maybe, because if you do kill the expert and they don't fire him, they might settle the case. However, you are kind of tipping your hat for what you're going to do. So I'd rather ambush him, because I know that I'm going to get him.
Me too. Me too.
One of the things I'm blessed with, I have a photographic memory.
Beautiful.
So I do very little trial prep. If I'm working on a case, and it's a little different now because when I first became a lawyer, I was doing the complaints. I was even doing the intakes. I was doing the intakes. I was doing the complaints. I was doing the rogs. I was doing the depths. I was doing the expert discovery. I was doing the arbitrations, and then I was doing the trials. So I knew the cases. So I didn't have to prep that much because if I look at an MRI report, for example, and it could be 2 years before, I remember exactly what the findings are. So, when I try cases, I don't want to use any notes. I want to just talk. And that's pretty much what I do. And I've even had adjusters come up to me like after 4 days. I'm just mopping the floor up, with these guys. Yeah. And she's saying, I never saw a guy not use any notes. I said, well, I know the case. I've kind of lived it for the last, 4 years. So I know it. And then I know a lot of other lawyers who they prepare so much, like for weeks before. So they're killing themselves for weeks, even before the trial starts. What's your plan? How do you do it?
I'm in the Ed Capozzi School of Trial Law. I use virtually no notes. My examinations are conversational and short. The one thing that I've done that most lawyers haven't gotten to or choose not to is putting in very short trials.
Tell everyone about what you did on that one case, a double amputee case you had.
So it's a perfect example. And even my partner looked at me and said, I just can't believe what we just did in the courtroom. So we had a case involving a young man, 19 years old, on his motorcycle in Middlesex County, in a large industrial park where there was a history of drag racing. And he didn't realize it. And he's driving his motorcycle. Next thing he knows, he's in the direct line of the drag racers. A drag racer at 90 miles an hour hits him, cuts off his arm and half his leg. He should have died, but he survived. It's amazing. So when we tried the case, I put him on, I put his father on, and an expert to talk about his 16 surgeries. All of that was done in an hour and 10 minutes. That was the whole trial. 1 hour and 10 minutes was the trial. That's it. And the jury awarded with all of the molding based upon prejudgment interest, et cetera. That turned out to be a $49 million verdict, which I think stands as the largest motorcycle auto case in New Jersey. But that went in an hour and 10 minutes. And I also try really hard during trial on cross-examination of adverse witnesses to keep my examination to 12 minutes, 14 minutes. It's very weird, but I believe that juries get it early on. I subscribe to all of the research that says that juries make their mind up 80% of the times after the opening. So I'm not going to burden them, and I want to get to the end zone as quick as I can. I want the verdict as quick as I can.
I love that because when I was first trying cases, I would try to make the trial as long as possible to try to make the case appear bigger than it was. So if I had 10 doctors who had examined my client, I would call 10 doctors. I mean, I wouldn't have them on for a long time. I'd have them on probably 45 minutes each. But like I said, I wanted the jury to think the case was more serious than it might be. But, following COVID and we started doing, I did 3 Zoom trials, which was totally bizarre.
That's crazy.
It was nuts.
Yeah, we had a couple too. They were nuts.
It was like the Brady Bunch. You're looking at a bunch.
Looking at a jury, you're looking at screens.
Yeah, it was really bad. It was bad. But during that time, I kind of changed the way I was trying cases. I wanted to get people on and off. So I was doing very short directs, very short crosses. And I was doing long openings and closings because, like you said, 80% of the cases they say are one in openings. We go first. The way I look at it is I dig that hole so deep, they're never going to be able to dig their way out of it.
Beautiful. Absolutely great.
I know I've seen a couple TV shows that you've had. Tell everyone about the Boy Scouts case.
Well, that was that was a really interesting case, and it kind of broke the mold because the Boy Scouts historically had beaten all these cases around the country on statute of limitations grounds. And we were one of the very few cases that was tried. We tried it in New Jersey in 2018, and we were successful in getting around the statute of limitations. I represented 3 scouts here in Parsippany, New Jersey, that were molested by the scout leader. And into the trial, the case settled where the Boy Scouts paid us north of 10 million to settle that case. And about a year later, they filed for bankruptcy, but we had settled, so it was good. And all these years later, they're just beginning to distribute the billions of dollars that they've agreed to pay all of these about 90,000 victims. It was a tragedy. And what I did is at the end of that trial, I took my witnesses in the trial, and I turned it into a documentary called Boy Scouts Honor. And what it did, it tracked the 80 or 100-year history of how they identified the abusing scoutmasters and never did anything about it. They allowed it to go on for decades, and they had files on each of these men and failed ever to do anything.
Really? So they knew about it and just let it
They
happen.
knew about it, and it was kept under lock and key in Dallas, which was the headquarters, with given access to only 2 or 3 executives each year. It was a very, very locked up secret, which of course came out through all these trials.
Wow. Now there's another documentary you've done. What is this one about?
Well, the Boy Scouts I actually produced. The one that's on TV now involves a case that I was involved in, I handled, and it was a young woman who was being trained by an Olympic medalist in dressage.
What is dressage?
Dressage is it's not jumping, it's the horse does
Oh, it's
a
horse.
variety of kind of tricks or presentations. It's a very, intricate way of training the horse, um, and she was living
You know what? I've seen that one.
Yeah.
Now that you
They
mention
kinda
about it, they
dance
kind of
and pray
dance like
that's it.
sideways and
That's
stuff.
exactly
Yeah.
right. Dance and they do side steps.
Yeah, I saw that one. Now that you
Yeah,
mention it,
yeah. And as a result of conflict between the teacher, a guy named Barrison, and the young woman, named Canarick, he shot her point blank to kill her. She survived, and then they did a documentary about the case. And remarkably, when Barrison was tried criminally in Morristown, he would come to the courtroom, and I was there
Yeah.
because I had the civil end of the case. He would come to the courtroom acting strange and crazy. He beat it on temporary insanity, which virtually nobody in the country ever wins that defense. And of course, if you see him now, he's perfectly fine.
Yeah.
Perfectly
And
fine.
weren't you quoted in that
Yeah,
documentary?
yeah. So when the verdict came down, I did an interview for Court TV, and I said the only temporary insanity in that trial was in the jury room because they bought his nonsense.
Yeah,
And
you
then they played that in the documentary.
you never hear anybody win on temporary
Never,
insanity. I
never.
mean, that's really rare. So I've been held in contempt a couple times. I've been fined a couple times, but I mean, I think you broke the record. Why don't you tell us about some of the times you got in trouble in court?
Well, I actually wear my contempt and sanctions as a badge of honor, and it's not going to change. This is who I was as a kid, and it's hopefully it'll never change. I probably have paid to date maybe 90 or 100,000 fines over the years for a variety of things. One of the earliest citations was I handled a case involving the doctor who started the first immediate care walk-in centers in New Jersey. Now they're all over where you could go to a shopping
Emerging
mall.
men or
They're
something.
exactly City Med where you walk in, no appointment necessary, and you get treated. Well, in the late 80s, they did not exist in New Jersey. And one of the doctors in Bergen County, who's passed, he formed two walk-in centers, and he brought in several partners that he worked with, and several of these were of Russian descent. And what happened is those partners brought in some very, very unsavory gangsters. And what they did is they physically took over both of the centers, and then it was a $35 entry for an examination. What they would do is they would not charge $35, they would check off every single possible test. So they'd run thousands of dollars. Each of the centers generated between 12 and $15 million in fraudulent billing until they were shut down. So we were suing these gangsters, in my opinion, that took over the two centers. And at the trial, I thought the judge did not really understand that this was a Russian mob takeover and was clueless. So when I got the biggest partnership verdict in the history of Bergen County in 1992, I drove back to my office and the Bergen Record called me to say, "What's your comment? The judge threw out your verdict."
Because of what the verdict was thrown out afterwards?
Without notice to the lawyers, a multi-million-dollar verdict in Bergen County and Hackensack after a 2-month trial involving, in my view, the Russian mob and later tracked by the New York Times. I'll tell you about that. I said, "What do you mean they threw the verdict out?" "Well, yeah." I said, "I just got the verdict an hour ago." Sure enough, the judge threw the verdict out. I then filed an ethics charge against her, something no lawyers do. And she then fined me $6,000 and told me she should have locked me up in jail.
And what ultimately happened?
What ultimately happened is the verdict got reinstated. We then went back and tried it and got billions more in punitive damages. One of the doctors that we hit filed bankruptcy. I won't identify him now, but he ended up doing um, a lot of things in the medical field that were highly questionable. The lead gangster, in my view, he was featured by the New York Times in a series of articles about all of his other mob-related schemes. He ended up being jailed in Belarus, and then my understanding is got released from jail, came back to the U.S., but he was connected to multi-billion-dollar schemes. And again, the Times ran a long article or long series of articles on what he did. So that was the first round of sanctions, and there were many following that. And the reason is that when I believe the judge is not treating either myself or my client fairly, I will tell them. I don't shrink away from that. I'm not there to be a shrinking violet. I'm there to represent my client and win the case.
One thing, so I've argued in the Supreme Court. You've argued in the Supreme Court 18 times, which is unheard of. The one thing I came away with from arguing in the Supreme Court was the respect in that room. It's unbelievable. I've never seen anything. I mean, there are judges in the lower courts that are very respectful, but the amount of respect that is in the Supreme Court, the way they treat you, the way everyone treats each other. I mean, it's unbelievable. It's like something that I was amazed by it. And I was really thankful that I got to experience that. So when I have a judge who's pleasant, I'm like, oh, great. At least I have a pleasant judge. But I think all the judges need to be, maybe they need to go to a Supreme Court argument or something just to see how to behave.
I have been, it's one of the parts of law practice that is extraordinarily upsetting and disappointing to me. I've had judges basically take away my case. They have put their thumb on the scale. They have completely intentionally denied a fair trial. I tell them straight up to their face. I take many, many appeals. And for the first half of my career, it was absolute havoc. It was open warfare between me and judges. About halfway into my career, things changed when a number of the judges started hiring me for themselves and their families. And that's when things changed, when they realized that I was going to fight and I was going to get good verdicts. But to this day, I think there is a bias in the courts against plaintiffs and plaintiffs' lawyer. There's a bias against people fairly recovering what they're entitled to, and there's a strong bias against those handful of lawyers like us that do it and earn substantial monies for doing it. I think a lot of judges resent that.
I never thought of that. That could be true. One thing, like a lot of lawyers, that the older lawyers that when I was up and coming would say, you can't take the case personally. I'm like, then I can't take the case
Yeah.
because there's no way for me to separate like my passion for, to try the case. I can't just, forget about it when I get home. I'm living this thing, living and breathing and sleeping and dreaming about it like 24/7. So I'm very passionate about it. And I want to win for these people because I feel bad for them. And a lot of times, rightfully so. Some of the stories that we see are just unbelievable. I'm very passionate about what I do. And a lot of times I have to deal with the judges who I don't think have the experience that I do or other lawyers have that, they didn't, in other words, like prosecutors, for example. Prosecutors know evidence. You have a former prosecutor who's a judge, they're great. They know the evidence and make really sound rulings on evidence. A lot of the other ones, they never tried a case, so they don't know the rules of evidence.
Yeah, it's extremely disheartening to go before a judge who is a city councilman, a local mayor, counsel to some zoning board who's never tried a complicated injury case, and they're making calls on balls and strikes, never doing it before, which substantially affect the outcome of our case. I don't know any other way to change it, but I can tell you that I have had real trouble with that for years, and I've let many, many judges know I have trouble with that, and I've let many, many appellate panels know that I have trouble with that, and I'm not gonna stop, and don't you stop either. You gotta just keep it in the wall.
I've never done the 90% of what you've done. I still think
Yes, you have.
I've caused some trouble, but not as much as you.
Yes, you
I
have.
just I want to keep practicing. I don't want to get suspended or something. But you know, do you think it's gotten worse over the years or it's gotten better?
Well, the early years of my practice were very, very tough because I was unknown, and I had to prove myself every time. I would be appealing every bad verdict, every bad, ruling. I'd have to try cases over and over again. I'd lose it. I'd take an appeal. I'd win the appeal. I'd go back and try the case all over again. So, the early years were very tough because, again, no matter what anybody tells you, in each county, there's a clique. There's a small group of lawyers that are tied in with a handful of judges that run the trial calendar, and they have huge advantage over outsiders like us.
I
They
know,
just do.
I know exactly what you mean. Now, so I've tried cases, had them appealed, either lost or won, and tried them again. I've done it 4 times, and I've had to try them twice. How many have you?
Uh, I think the last count I've retried 9 cases twice and 1 case a third time before I
Now, do you find it easier to try it the second time?
I do.
See,
Yeah, I do because I try to, the perfect example, was a case I tried in the late '90s. It was an iron worker that, uh, slipped off of a wet beam in a, building he was, constructing down at, Rutgers. I tried the case. At the end of the case, the other lawyer said to me, he said, "Bruce," he said, "You had to lose this case because you have an Italian plaintiff and you had a predominantly African American jury." And I've said to him, "What are you talking about?" He said, "Don't you realize that in Newark, historically, there are certain ongoing tensions between these ethnic groups?" I said, "I'm clueless. I had no idea." He said, "You can't do that." I said, "Really?" The case got reversed, and I tried it again. And then I picked more of a diverse jury. And again, oftentimes you can't even determine what you're going to pick because you run out of
Yeah.
strikes. And the exact same case with the exact same evidence, I went from 0 to 1.8 million in 97 or 98 because the jury composition. I never would have.
Now, what I do is I'm of the mindset, except for exceptional circumstances, but I'm of the mindset, I don't care what 8 jurors are in that box. I'm picking the first 8 that come in. I don't use any challenges. In fact, I tell the defense attorney, hey, I'll agree to the first 8 if you agree to the first 8. They're like, I can't do that. I got to talk to the carrier, blah, blah, blah. So I've been doing this now for a while. So what ends up happening is they use 4 or 5 challenges. I don't use any. Then, now that I see the jury, now I have 6 and they have 1, and I get my jury in the box.
I think it's brilliant.
That's something I've been doing. Another thing,
Brilliant.
do you go with, if you have 6 jurors, you have 2 alternates. Do you let all 8 deliberate? Or do you,
Yeah, statistically, we shouldn't, and I always do.
I never do.
Yeah.
I mean, the only reason I do, because the judge puts a lot of pressure on you to let those 2 extra
That's
jurors deliberate.
Yeah.
And I've been so lucky over the years. So, obviously, if it's easier to prove 5 out of 6 than it is 7 out of 8. So for those reasons, I always go with 6 and I strike 2. But you don't know which 2 it's going to be.
I'm going to push back on you, Ed. I want you to think about this. When you're trying that case, you've identified 1, maybe 2 leaders. You do that literally in jury selection.
Yeah.
You're going to know exactly who's going to lead that jury. And every day you're going to watch who goes to lunch with who talks to each other in the hallway, who leans over during the testimony where they make comments about, okay. So I am never risking losing my leader. I won't risk it.
But that leader could be against you. That's number 1. Number 2, this is where luck comes in. So there are always jurors and a lot of times, and I'll tell you a story after this, but there are 1 or 2 jurors I'm not like connecting with. So I'm like, I got to get rid of 2 and 7. I got to get rid of 2 and 7. So I tell the judge, I'm going to, just excuse 2 of them. So they put, this is like, something you see in the 1930s. They have like a little box and they put the numbers in it and they roll it around and they pick out. And I'm like sitting there praying 2, 7, 2, 7, 2, 7. And it comes out 2 and 7. I'm like, yes, I got rid of the 2 that I didn't like. In another case, I'm putting on a pretty good case. This was a small case. The judge, he wanted me to settle the case for $7,500 and I refused to do it. I wouldn't do it. It was just one bulge with chiro treatment.
Okay.
So I had this Irish chiropractor testify, and so I said I left on like Mrs. McGillicuddy, and I let all 8 deliberate because I didn't want Miss McGillicuddy to get thrown, be the one that got thrown off. I win the case 7-1.
She goes against
She's the one who went against me, and she's smiling at me the whole trial. 1.5 million.
That's incredible.
The judge, and this was the funniest thing, like the standard for a runaway jury, I guess, verdict is shock the conscience of the judge, right? When the 4-person read out the verdict, the judge almost fell out of his chair. And I said, oh, God, he definitely was shocked. I mean, he was visibly shocked.
Did you leave it?
No, he threw it right out. That's one of the ones I had to try a second time. But I had another judge once say, I got a decent verdict in the case, but it was lower than in fact, my client rejected $1 million offer after we closed, right before the jury deliberated. And I knew at the best I was getting 50-50 liability. It was a big truck accident. I had the witness for the defense was a Marine who was driving behind my client who said he never braked. And, so I knew it was a tough case. So I said to him, look, that's like getting a $2 million verdict because, you're definitely going to get hit with 50%, maybe more. I mean, we might not get anything.
Right.
So he refused to do it. The verdict came back, I think, like 5 and change or something. So he basically threw away $450,000. But when the verdict came back, the judge, as the jury was walking out, turned and said, that was shocking. So I'm like, oh yeah, baby. He not only did he think it, but he spoke it. So when I argued for a new trial, I said, Judge, you said that was shocking. So to me, that means it shocked your conscience. Oh no, and I thought it was slow, but it didn't shock me. I said, so why'd you say? And I appealed it and I lost the appeal.
I had exactly the same thing last year. The $20 million verdict, which I thought should have been 50. Judge basically said, this is shocking, and then left it as is. It happens.
Did he think it was low, you think? Or he thought it was high? Shocking.
Low.
Really? Oh, so that's good for you then. No wonder. Mine was the opposite. But like I said, in that particular case, I mean, how do you prove it shocked the judge's conscience? In the one case, the judge literally almost fell out of the chair, so I knew he was shocked. And this guy said it and still didn't
So if you track the cases where the court has increased the verdict versus decreased the verdict, it's about, over the course of the 30, 40 years that I've been tracking, it's about 50-1. 50 times they'll decrease it and once they'll increase it. So we have I say we have no shot generally of getting verdicts increased. But we're always at risk of getting our good verdicts decreased. And up until yesterday, the largest verdict, which is remarkable, that was ever sustained in Jersey's history, injury verdict, was 19 million. Okay. Every major verdict in New Jersey over the last 40 years has been thrown out. And look, my firm had, the leading verdict of New Jersey. It was thrown out. It was thrown out. And I knew the day it came down over 100 million, I knew.
I got a verdict in Hudson County. It was the highest product liability verdict for that year. So prior to the start of the trial, the judge is trying to settle the case with us, and she's telling me I should take $200,000. I'm saying no. So during the trial, and I'm beating the hell out of these guys. During the trial, she keeps bringing me in chambers to take the $200,000. I said, Judge, don't bring me in here again. I'm not settling the case. So
what was the verdict?
$5 million.
Great.
Right. So
just great.
So after that, they filed a motion for remitted and for a new trial. So we go back and we were, before the motion hearing, she brings us in chambers and says, look, I thought it was worth $200,000. I said, Judge, you didn't know anything about the case. You hadn't even met.
Care what they think it's worth. You didn't live it.
I know. I said it was worth. I thought it could have been a higher verdict. I mean, this guy was obviously injured. It was an elevator crash, and we ended up settling it for $3 million. But it's, you never get what you get. You never get it. They always
completely agree.
Throw it out, or they throw it out.
Every major verdict in my entire career has been appealed. Every single one. There
was a case. It wasn't my case. It was a guy. The jury found the person permanently injured and gave him 0. So that was appealed, and they upheld the verdict. How could you find somebody permanently injured and give him 0? They asked for an additor, which they didn't get.
Well, and that was one of my Supreme Court cases where the defense admitted it was a rear end hit. The defense admitted there was some injuries, and the jury gave him 0.
Yeah.
Right. The appellate court said we're affirming that. I got the Supreme Court to take the case, and they reversed and said no. If there is an admission that some injuries occurred, the jury is obligated to make an award. And I argued that in 2002.
Yeah, so that was before my time.
How was that?
That was 24 years ago.
Yeah.
So I became a lawyer in 2005. Yeah. So that was 3 years before me. But there are cases since.
That's right.
Where they're giving 0 and it's being upheld.
Yeah. They don't know about the other case.
Exactly. They should probably read that one. Yeah. How do you get your cases? I mean, you get some of the biggest cases, obviously the most valuable cases. Like, how do you get them?
It's a great question. So I'm going to, first of all, tell you, it's just luck of the draw. That's number one. Number two, we get a lot of our cases from the press that we get on the prior cases. So anytime there's an interesting case or a major verdict, we generally get a lot of press on it. And anytime we appear, Good Morning America, Today's Show, Stuart Varney, I mean, all 60 Minutes, those shows that we've done over the years, those shows also create a lot of buzz. Anytime you get a piece in the New York Times or the New York press, you're going to get good responses. So we get a fair amount from the press on the prior cases. And then we get a good chunk of the work now from lawyers who don't really do the trial work and don't handle these larger cases. It's kind of out of their wheelhouse. So we'll get a lot of law firms call us in and say, look, we want you to run with this. Or, the case recently, there was like $3 million on the table, and they called me and I said, that's peanuts. And we settled it probably 3 months later I think I was in for 3 months. We settled for 10.
Yeah.
I just knew it was peanuts, but the other lawyer was going to take it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
You know, I was at a seminar I was actually speaking at. They had a defense attorney, like a big shop from the Midwest.
Yeah.
And he said, there's not a plaintiff. He goes, there are, but he goes, all we need to do, the case could be worth 10 million, 20 million. You offer like a solo practitioner, 3 million.
He'll take it all.
Because they get a $1 million fee.
He'll take it.
Says they'll take it all day long. And I'm not, I've never, done that.
Please, I've never done it either.
So I just, I know you know this because you talked me through some of the things I was going through last week, but I was supposed to be on trial right now in this George Washington Bridge case where this person was catastrophically injured. And, I was really struggling with settling the case because I knew it was worth a lot of money. However, I had a person who was incapacitated and, I had to do what was right for that client. And we ultimately settled it for $10.5 million. But ironically, here I am. I would have been on trial right now. There are 2 more incidences on the George Washington Bridge last week where debris was falling off the bridge. It would have been the best week to ever try a case. These things don't happen. So I did an interview with CBS News on Friday, and this was at about 5 p.m. And they said it's going to be on the 11 o'clock news tonight. And they were going to interview the person who was injured in the case this week, which I thought was going to be great because that person would obviously see me on TV with them and I would get that case. But that person refused to be interviewed. So, it didn't happen. But, it's...
How do you get your cases, Ed?
Pretty much the same way. I mean, some of my biggest cases I've had came from other lawyers who, it just gets too big for them. It's too expensive. I mean, we have big firms. We can afford these cases. And I'll spend a lot, $500,000, $600,000, whatever it costs, $500,000, $600,000 on a case if it warrants it. I always spend a lot of money. I hire more experts than I need. I do a lot of demonstrative evidence. I do a lot of animated videos. I want to show the jury the case. So I spend a lot of money. So, I guess because of my reputation, a lot of law firms send me their cases. They're just too big for them. I get from that way. I get them from prior clients. And, I've gotten cases from judges. I've tried cases before, who have recommended, to their friends and family, which I always find really flat. Defense attorneys, get a lot of cases from defense attorneys, that's also very flattering. But what I don't do, and I know you don't do, is advertise on television or billboards or things like that, right?
I don't do billboards. I did for a very short period of time. I did a couple of very 15-second clips on TV. I did that for about 3 months. My partners wanted to try it out. We did it, and I said that's the end of it. So I don't know. Maybe I'm just too old-fashioned, but I just don't advertise. Thankfully we're very, very, very busy with major cases, and that generates more work really than is necessary.
Yeah, I think if you do that mass advertising, it probably generates a lot of smaller cases. Exactly. There is a market for that stuff. Yeah. But, I just don't, and there are guys who do it very tastefully. And I know, and I know there's a reason for it, and I know why they do it. Yeah. Because it works. But, I'm not a big fan of it. And I had a recent trial where at that trial, a lot of the jurors, and I don't think these firms who do that recognize what they're doing to these jury pools, because they're destroying them. They hate these things. They think lawyers are behind all these cases and that every client is a fraud and they're doing it for the money. And some of these people are severely injured, yet they still paint them all with the same brush. Yep. So during jury selection, not one, not two, at least 5 or 6 different potential jurors, talked about the billboards and what a turnoff they were. So, it really bothered me when I heard that stuff from the jury, because I was thinking to myself, wow, they're really pissed off about these billboards. So when I did my closing that day, not that day, when the trial was over, when I did my closing, I said to the jury, you were charged with unconscious bias. You're going to be talked to from the judge about conscious biases. These are the things that that you don't like, kind of like the billboards that you talked about. And I said, when I drive down the road and I see these billboards, it makes me sick to my stomach. I said, it cheapens my profession. It looks bad for my client. So I don't need billboards. I don't have billboards because I don't need them because I'm a real lawyer. Like I said in my closing, and then I got a nice verdict in that case.
I think it's just brilliant. Brilliant.
And now I'm kind of determined. I will never have a billboard because a lot of people say, "Oh, why don't you just do a billboard?" I don't want to do them because for those reasons that I said. So before we go, Bruce, I just wanted to thank you because that was fun, man. That was really fun. It's always great talking to you. And people always say like, you guys are in competition with each other, and how do you bring on somebody that you're in competition? Not only we're in competition, we're right across the park from each other. So but the thing is, the way I look at it, is a lot of room at the top.
Well, it's more than that. Have I ever once in all the years, not thrilled when you call me and say, "Hey, what's your gut on this? What would you do?" I love working with you.
Yeah, me too, man.
I just do.
And we're going to try a case together, right? You said before you die.
Absolutely. Before they take me out.
Last thing I'm going to ask you, for these younger lawyers out there, what's the key to success for you?
Interesting. I think it's really two or three things. One is you really have to work hard. You can't build a reputation. You can't be a trial lawyer without working your ass off. And to this day, almost 50 years into the practice, I still work 7 days a week. There's never a day except on vacation where I'm completely off. I'm always on the phone. I'm always dealing with clients, always doing strategy issues. So I think you really, really got to work. And then I think the other thing which is what I did early on when I went from being a big firm corporate lawyer to a jury lawyer, which is a huge, huge difference in practice and a huge step, is I identified trial lawyers and watched them. So when I say I snuck into your courtrooms, that wasn't made up. I snuck in and watched you try cases, and I've done that over the years. Watch other good lawyers try cases, steal from them, and make it better. So that's the key. Hard work and copying and making better what great trial lawyers do.
Thank you very much, man.
You're the best.
Really, great. Man. Really had a great time.
Really
Thank you very much. And that's it, folks. We'll be back in a couple of weeks with our second episode, and we'll see you soon. Thank you.
Best. I got to tell you, what a great idea. What a great idea.